Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Habitus. I'm Michael Pattison. I'm here with my co-host Bobby Lowe. Bobby, it's been less than a week since Twin Peaks, The Return, aired its finale. I've had 2 days in which to digest what it all means. Still, obviously, wondering what it all means. First question, let's go straight to it. Did you enjoy Twin Peaks, The Return?
Yeah, on balance, I think so, yeah. Did you?
Yes, although it wasn't really until the final moments that I was... I mean, I'm still obviously trying to figure it all out. I know, for instance, because we're exchanging opinions about it as it's still airing and it's still unfolding, and I know that you fluctuated your opinion of it as on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah,
and
on a scene-to-scene basis.
Yeah, I know that mine did also. I know that it began very promisingly, very intriguingly. I did find that it was easier to watch once I had like 3 or 4 episodes to catch up on. I found that I was enjoying it much less when I was watching it sort of on a week-to-week basis, waiting for each episode. I know that, we spoke about it in April when I was in Dublin, and you asked me, are you looking forward to Twin Peaks? And at that point, I didn't really know, to be honest. Like, I thought it was going to be, honestly, a disaster, which obviously it isn't. In fact, I think it's kind of a remarkable achievement that, Lynch and Frost were able to even get this thing made, get it green-lit. I think I'd like to know what the people who kind of okayed it thought of it once it sort of came to light.
Right, I mean, that was it. It was like... it seems to have been greenlit on the basis of the the rise of nostalgia TV, and that's kind of what they expected. They wanted what I'm sure a lot of Twin Peaks fans wanted from it is, to catch up with Ed and Norma and Shelley and obviously Cooper, which is the great bait and switch of this season. That we're gonna tell you what happened to Cooper.
Yeah, and actually we don't get Cooper until
episode
16, 2.5 hours, which was the sort of source of my ongoing fascination with it. Like, and I know it was with yours also. Like, at what point are we going to get the key protagonist from the series? Like, because it's at what point do we get Dougie Jones? Is it 2.5 hours in?
Yeah, episode 3 is Cooper exits he begins his exodus from the lodge at the end of the opening 2-parter, so the end of hour 2. And he exits about halfway through the 3rd episode, and the real Dougie Jones is taken to the lodge.
That's right.
And turned into a ball bearing.
I mean, such is the nature of this show. Like, how do you even begin to sort of summarize it on a plot level? I mean, very sort of early on, I think I just abandoned all hope of following it, and actually began to appreciate it more on different levels because of that.
But actually, that doesn't bother me. I don't actually care about the plot very much.
Did you care about the plot with the first 2 seasons?
I kind of hated most of the plot in the first 2 seasons.
I know that you went into this having rewatched the first 2 seasons shortly before it. I didn't, so I went into it and all of the sort of mythologies that Lynch had sort of... Because Lynch came back very late on in the 2nd season to kind of arrest it, or to rescue it from the doldrums of the soap opera that it had become. And a lot of the sort of FBI stuff that's leading into, the subplot in this 3rd season with Bad Cooper, or Mr. C, and how they're trying to lure in this evil force with some secret FBI fed operation. I missed all that, so I didn't really know what was going on for a lot of it, to be honest.
Right.
And that was okay. I was fine with that. But the whole with Albert and Cole, played by Miguel Ferrer and David Lynch, respectively, their scenes kind of they had a warmth and a tone to them that I really liked. I liked watching them, but I didn't really know what was going on.
Except Miguel Ferrer was playing Albert quite differently than he did in the original show.
Yes, and I think a lot of that
he was a much less
by the fact that
flamboyant personality.
It's true, and I think a lot of that was informed by the fact that in real life he was, going through terminal illness, and it's impossible to watch this as a fan or as a viewer of the original series without knowing that he had died in the interim between filming and.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the cast had. Every other episode is dedicated to the memory of one of the cast.
Yeah, and we get a belated dedication to Jack Nance, who played Pete Martell.
Right. Who shows up, who has an appearance at the end.
He does. In a scene in the second last episode.
Yeah, the second to last.
The one that was just dedicated to him. Right. But I mean, Lynch has made films since Jack Nance died, though. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting
when did Jack Nance
die? 96, was it? Okay. I mean, it's there's a deathliness that kind of encroaches upon this series or this season thematically. I mean, Catherine Coulson also died in real life, who plays a log lady, and she dies within the show as well. Mm-hmm. And again, it's impossible to watch the scenes between her and Hawk, which all take place over the phone, without knowing that, and of course David Bowie was the big one, who was apparently going to be in this season.
Right, now played by a kettle.
Yeah, now played by a kettle. I mean, it's. I'm still sort of digesting really what to make of it. I'm actually, I think very belatedly it got an energy of its own. I mean, not of its own, because it already had an energy of its own, but it sort of. Its plot all kind of came together in the end, and for a large part of the midsection of this season, I actually didn't think we were going to get an intersection of the different elements at play.
Right.
So I was very pleased when it did.
Yeah.
I mean, there was also the revelation, or the gradual revelation, that we're seeing different plots from different time zones. Which was compounded by the fact that they're also geographically sprawling as well. I mean, the big thing in the first hour was that, oh my God, we're in North Dakota. Oh my God, we're in
all over the place. Yeah.
Las Vegas. Oh my God, we're in New York. And actually, very little of it was
in Twin Peaks. And what was in Twin Peaks was largely in the sheriff's station.
So
but the timeline discontinuity was at the end of the last episode, where you get Dougie turning up. You get a lot of different shots of different things happening at different points in the story at the beginning of the 18th episode. Am I misremembering that?
I don't know. I mean, it's been a whole 2 days since I watched it, so don't throw a difficult question like that at me.
What you were saying about Dougie, last night I watched the entire series again on times 30 speed.
How did that work out?
It took about 45 minutes, but it was actually a good refresher. But I remembered, I actually can't remember now if it was episode 5 or episode 6, but it was at that point that I thought the return of Cooper proper was imminent, because Dougie has a vision in his living room where he sees, is it Mike? Mm. Yeah, he sees Mike, the one-armed man, in the floor, and he says, "Don't die, wake up." And I thought, okay, next episode for sure. And then 10 hours later, we finally got Dougie, or we finally got Cooper back. And it's interesting that you say that you found it better to binge multiple episodes, because there is a kind of a contradiction between the fact that Lynch, as a lot of filmmakers who transition to television do, refers to this as an 18-hour film. Whereas, I know that there are such things as 18-hour films, but typically films are not 18 hours for a good reason, because you're supposed to digest them in a single sitting. So if it were an 18-hour film, you wouldn't watch it over, 15, 16 weeks? Mm-hmm. And that it does work better in larger chunks is interesting. I didn't, with the exception of the first two-parter. Oh no, the first 4 episodes aired on consecutive nights, actually.
It's true. Yeah. And then there was a break after that because of, I think, 4th of July. Or 5th of July. I mean, I remember you expressing exasperation at the fact that, we were having another hour of Dougie Jones, or another hour slot in which Dougie Jones was kind of appear. And didn't you refer to him as like a one-line joke or one-line gag?
It is a little bit one note, yeah.
I mean, I think the fascinating thing with this is that it's a very, very reflexive exercise, the third season, I think, and it's about, as much as Cooper's return, it's about Lynch and Frost negotiating the sort of process of getting back to Twin Peaks, into that universe, which kind of is expressed in the fact that, as I said, this geographical sprawl and the kind of for every sort of subplot that seemed to be wrapped each week, it seemed to open up another 10. And it seemed to almost consciously frustrate itself, the show, in that respect. I don't know if you had a chance to read the assessment by Adam Naiman, Canadian critic for The Ringer, of the season finale, but he read the season finale. I have a quotation here. He said, "There is maybe a metaphor here for Lynch and Frost's larger project, which is to problematize the process of homecoming, of return and its different connotations for its characters as well as for its audience. The controlled way that the series switched between a rigorous commitment to its own mythology, good-natured fan service, and outright contempt for the wishes or expectations of diehards suggested that its creators were passionate but also ambivalent about playing around in a universe they'd long left behind." So coming back to your expectations of the show to be kind of, within the context of the rise of nostalgia TV, I think this show is about the mechanisms of nostalgia and the problems of navigating that. And I think that informs the kind of deep sense of melancholy that permeates the whole show. I mean, it's so slow. And I know that Lynch is, Lynch, and the adjective Lynchian is connotes this dreamlike quality in his films and in the original TV show. And maybe at a later point we'll do an episode of this dedicated to Lynch and his, and analyze the show within the broader context of his filmography. But I mean the unwavering pace, I know that I found it sometimes exasperating, and also simultaneously I was, admiring it as well, because it takes a certain confidence, I suppose. This is the first thing that Lynch has put out. He's put himself on a cliff edge almost, 10 years after Inland Empire. I was just pleased to be watching something that he made again, for the first, 5 or 6 hours of this. And then I realised, wow, I've watched like 12 hours of this, and wow, I've watched 18 hours of this, and now it's over, and it's like, it feels very much like a swan song for him. It feels very much like a...
You don't think there'll be another season?
I don't think there will be. I hope there isn't.
You hope there isn't?
I hope there isn't. I think the finale, the more I think about it, was kind of perfect.
Yeah, it was great. The final episode was amazing.
I mean, the 17th episode wraps everything up.
The 17th episode is the real, the fan service one that really gets everybody back together.
Absolutely.
But I love the 17th. I love the 16th and 17th episodes, but the first 20 minutes of the 18th episode, I was so annoyed with.
You were?
Yeah, because it opens with Cooper coming out of the lodge, out of the White Lodge, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's the White Lodge.
Yeah, I mean, I should say at this point, just as a disclaimer, that I watched the last 3 episodes back to back.
Right.
So distinguishing between them is going to be very difficult.
Oh, okay, right. Well, the 17th episode is the one where they finally get rid of Bob.
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
with the green glove.
The green glove guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they, Diane, the woman with no eyes, who came out of the lodge, she turns into Diane, the real Diane.
That's right. Yeah.
And then Cooper and Diane and Cole go down. It's like they go down into the basement or something of the police station, and
with the key to the hotel though.
Key. Right, yeah. And then
which is
is it the police station, or are they in the Great Northern?
At any rate, it's somewhere. It's not a hotel.
They go somewhere, and Cooper passes into the lodge. And then that's the end of that episode. And then the beginning of the 18th episode, he emerges from the lodge and meets with just Diane. They're in the forest.
Yeah.
And then that's when you get all these little shots from different points in the timeline. You get a shot of Dougie coming home.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, to Janie and Sonny Jim. But then it's Diane and Cooper driving down the highway at night, and they're talking about, do you really want to do this? It might be different on the other side. And they go to a spot where there's like the electricity, and they drive through, and they come out in Odessa, and they go to a motel. Diane,
Odessa, Texas.
Is it in Texas? Yeah, I guess it is. Is it
Well,
Texas?
it's certainly not in the UK.
No. But they, when Cooper goes in to book the room, Diane looks out the window of the car and she sees her doppelganger looking back at her.
That's right.
And then they go in and they have that weird sex scene set to at the end of the night, isn't it? The song.
Well, it's a song it recurs from an earlier episode.
Right, and then when he wakes up, she's gone, and she's left him a note addressing him as Richard, and signed Linda.
Yeah.
And he leaves there, goes to the diner, and at this point I was like, this is the last episode, and you're introducing all of this new material, and I have no idea what's going on, and like we finally got back to Twin Peaks, and where are we now, you know? But then once he turned up at that woman's house, the other waitress, and started trying to convince her that she is Laura Palmer, from then until the end of the episode, I think is arguably the best thing Lynch has ever done.
Really? Yeah. Wow, you're gonna dive with 2 feet into that opinion.
Yeah. And the very, very final scene, because obviously, what is she? Her name is
Carrie Page.
Carrie Page. Okay, so she thinks that she's Carrie Page, but as he says, your father's name was Leland, and your mother's name was Sarah, and she kind of, you can see a little hint of recognition in when he says Sarah, and then, but she has this kind of like glazed expression all the way there, and just like she's in a dream. And then when they get to the house, and the woman is, you know, this strange woman is there. She's owned the house for years, and the people that she bought it from have nothing to do with the Palmers. And I think you're a little bit ahead of Cooper at that point. You're thinking, oh, it's a different. They've traveled in time. They're out of time. And then when they go back to the road, and I love McLaughlin's performance as Richard, because it's a little bit Cooper, but it's also a little bit Mr. C. And his body movements also are a little bit Dougie.
Particularly when he's in the cafe, Judy's, the diner.
He's Mr. C
and he's accosted by, he's confronted by 3 locals, and it's very Mr. C, that scene.
Yeah.
I actually, at one point in season 3, when I too was growing exasperated with Dougie Jones, I began to kind of like Mr. C.
Yeah, I like Mr. C.
I mean, it's a great performance by McLaughlin overall. I mean,
he plays six different versions of the same character.
Yeah, frustrated as it might have been to kind of have such a belated entrance for Cooper per se, I think what he was doing with his voice, with his eyes, with with the lack of facial expressions, I mean, it's really, really great stuff.
Yeah, he said that was the role he was most nervous to play, because he'd never played anybody like that before. He never played anybody as evil as that before.
Oh wow! I mean, I have a quick question here. I want to ask you what your best performance of the whole season was, and I ask it.
It has to be McLaughlin.
Yeah, I mean,
but aside from McLaughlin, I thought that Grace Zabriskie was amazing as Sarah Palmer.
Yeah, she's a real scene stealer.
Yeah.
And we have.
I thought Michael Cera was pretty amazing.
You did. I mean. I have other questions here relating to other things, and I think Sarah will satisfy a lot of them, but we'll get to those in due course. But the thing with Grace Zabriskie is, I mean, she also stole the 1 or 2 scenes she was in Inland Empire as well, I think, 11 years ago, when she plays inexplicably kind of with a Polish accent, and she's got that great line delivery in Inland Empire opposite Laura Dern in this plush living room when she goes, "Brutal fucking murder." She does an accent much better than I do, but
I haven't seen that since it came out. I don't really remember.
There's a real sense of dread to the 3rd season of Twin Peaks in general, but I think that sense of dread really sort of intensifies whenever we revisit the Palmer household, because the sense of loss that sort of permeates its space.
And I think that sorry, just to finish up with the final scene, that is part of what makes it so powerful. I think is the time that you have spent with Sarah on her own, and obviously the One thing I've seen people complaining about is that this season is not scary. That the Twin Peaks season 1 and 2, obviously in the minority, but they had moments that were extremely frightening, and this one doesn't. But I think the most frightening moments in it do come from Sarah Palmer, like her episode in the supermarket, and then obviously the amazing scene in the bar
where she
actually kills the truck U guy.
I mean, that scene exemplifies the whole sort of approach to each sort of dramatic beat that this season undergoes. Like, there's this kind of weird build-up, so it's playing with our familiarity with these characters and our proximity to them, and our wish for them to do certain things. Like, we want to see, Cooper as Cooper. We want to see, we want to see like the sheriff's office or whatever. That's one of those moments, I think, that we're waiting for, in which Sarah Palmer does something really sort of inexplicable and horrible, because the performance has been driving towards that. I think for the every time the sporadic appearances of Grace Zabriskie have kind of hinted at such horror, I think, through her facial expressions, through the general tone of the scenes, and that's a really sort of exciting moment as well, where for me, having almost lost faith at that point in the season, kind of leapt to life again. A friend of mine said she eats misogyny in that scene.
That's very good. But that the scene outside the house, right from the moment that he turns up at what is it again? Carrie Page. Right from that moment, I was absolutely transfixed by it. In a way that I hadn't been throughout the whole season. To reintroduce Laura Palmer in that completely abstract, inexplicable, surrealist way, and then they're driving back to Twin Peaks and like, what's going to happen when they get there? And you expect Sarah Palmer to answer the door, and it's a different woman, and then it's the intimation that this is a different time, or a different dimension, or something like that. And then they go back to the street, and Cooper gradually kind of he starts to feel more and more like Dougie in that moment, like the way he carries his body, and then he says, "What year is this?" kind of to himself, and then Laura, whose expression is still kind of glazed over, looks up at the house, and you hear it's Leland, you hear, isn't it, calling?
You hear. I think from the pilot episode, you hear Sarah Palmer's
it's Sarah
slow motion voice of saying Laura.
Okay. And then she screams, and the lights go out in the house, and like my blood just ran cold.
It did,
yeah. And like at the same time, I almost like burst into tears. I just thought it was so powerful.
Yeah, incredible. It's an incredibly sad scene as well. It's frightening.
In the best, the tradition of the best of Lynch, I think, is that he creates these incredibly emotionally intense scenes that are so. There's something so ineffable about them that you feel 3 or 4 different emotions at the same time, and I do think that's one of the best things he's ever done.
I mean, there's a lot of longers leading up to that scene, though.
Absolutely,
like those endless shots of the road at night, which we have come to associate with Lynch anyway, through Lost Highway, through Mulholland Drive, through Blue Velvet, and it's almost like a conscious slowdown. And again, like you, I actually had to click on my screen to see how long of the episode was left. I was like, there's only like 20 minutes left of the episode. Mm-hmm. Where the hell, like, why, what the hell's going on here?
But I went from being really annoyed with it in the opening 20 minutes to being like just glued to it in the last 30 minutes.
I mean, I think a lot of the charged energy or electricity, if I may use the term, does come from, as you mentioned, McLaughlin's performance, in the sense that this is a very different Cooper to the one that was, driving the preceding episode and the action in that episode. This is a transformed Cooper. It's arguably not even Cooper anymore.
This Richard.
It's Richard. Yeah, but who's Richard?
Exactly. Yeah, who's Richard? But,
there's a great article essay that attempts to decode the finale and wrap it up in terms of what's gone on in the first 2 episodes at waggish.org, Waggish, by David Auerbach, who's had the luxury of watching and rewatching episodes to sort of really get to terms with it and what it might mean on a narrative level. And it's a really persuasive argument, and it really kind of makes sense. And it made me want to rewatch the whole thing, maybe missing out some sections, because he has a question for you. Speed. He has a question for you. I know at one point, until I think the 8th episode, which is as a standalone segment, also pretty amazing.
Yeah, I actually remembered that as being entirely flashback, but it isn't. It the first 15 or 20 minutes is Mr. C killing I forget the name of the character, the guy who gets him out of prison.
Yeah,
he kills him, and then you see the whatever they're supposed to be, the miners, the God of Light guys.
God of Light.
They come and they do whatever they do to the body, and then it cuts to 1945, which
prompts like an origin story for the supervillain that it turns out to be the true villain or the true enemy or nemesis of season 3. And I love the sense like this suddenly politicized element of Lynch's Earth coming into play, where like he's contextualizing the formation of Bob, played by Frank Silva, or this all-encompassing evil that's kind of nationwide, and links that specifically to the atom bomb, the formation of nuclear power, which I found in itself like an inherently kind of strong idea. And I think Lynch kind of, from that, I was very sort of connected and attached with this villain stuff. But he has a question for you. Did this season need to be 18 hours long?
That's exactly what I was about to say. Would you have preferred it if it was 10 hours? Or 8 hours?
Instinctively, yes.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, looking back to it, I mean, there's a lot of, going back to the naming quotation, the switch between good-natured fan service and, commitments to its own mythologies. Like, we've got characters here such as Nadine with the eye patch, Dr. Jacoby.
Dr. Jacoby, yeah.
I mean, the season, isn't the first scene Dr. Jacoby, like, receiving a delivery of gold shovels? Or shovels that will become gold?
No, the first scene is in the Red Room, but yeah, it's one of the early scenes.
Yeah, it's certainly like the first colour scene, I think.
Right.
Because all of the Red Room stuff's like black and white.
Yeah, the Dr. Jacoby stuff with Nadine, they meet up at some point, don't they? And it's outside of her Silent Drape Runner store, which I remember being the first annoying subplot from the original series.
Well, this is. I mean, I read an article in the last yesterday by Matt Zoller Seitz, who's typically good at at kind of summarising these kinds of serial storytelling, and he's a big fan of The Sopranos, and I'm going to mention that later anyway. I'll mention it now. A large part of the finale, just to get off track a little, or to get back on track, a large part of the finale, and the second half of it in particular, felt for me like the episodes in The Sopranos, which was itself inspired by Twin Peaks. In the first half of the 6th season of Sopranos, when Tony's in a coma, I know you've seen it, but it's a long time ago maybe that you've seen it, but when he's in a coma, and we get into this alternate reality, and he's called Kevin Finity, and it's just this really kind of arbitrary dive into an alternative reality that we have no other option but to go with. And a lot of the Dougie Jones segments felt like that for me, like when you mentioned like the appearances of Mike showing up, and all of a sudden like this intuitive muscle memory coming in with Dougie Jones and Cooper springing into like this Jason Bourne like figure, and like Ike, when Ike the Spike tries to assassinate him outside of his office, and all of it. That's the moment where I thought, okay, Cooper's going to be back next week, and then of course we have another 10 hours of Lynch and Frost never really established the rules by which Dougie Jones is operating, really, and it's just like this, Deus Ex Machina. Whenever they need to kind of, further the plot, something kicks into gear. So those, if I was to rewatch it, those scenes might become a casualty of my sort of frustration,
right.
Let's say, and then the Dean stuff, definitely. Jacoby.
I would also add to that anything related to Ben Horne and his assistant, played by Ashley Judd.
What was that all about?
Exactly. And the scenes with them, and also the scenes with Audrey and her husband as well. They reminded me of the way that Arrested Development season 4 was produced, where they couldn't wrangle all of the people's schedules together, so they just wrote individual storylines so that they could shoot a storyline for the Jason Bateman character and then for the Michael Cera character. And it was like they couldn't get these actors, back, and that would account for the fragmented structure of the show as well.
Ganger.
Okay, some technical difficulties there. You were asking me if I would throw Andy and Lucy in with Ben and do you remember the name of
Ashley Judd's character?
Ashley Judd. I was forgetting her real name too.
No, one thing. Hold on. One thing I will say: the Ashley Judd scene and Ben Horne's scene. It's first time it happens, it's intriguing. Okay, cool. When it happens 3 episodes later and they're doing exactly the same thing, it's a little tedious, right? It gets monotonous quick. I will say this: the kind of high pitched sound that they do here, I think, is some kind of clue later on in episode 18. I think we hear that again once Cooper's about to go through the door into this basement. Carry on. I mean, I don't know the significance of it, but I do think it's there to kind of create some kind of echo at a later point.
And how do you feel about the approach to Lynch's material, where you're trying to decode his work and find out what, quote unquote, really happened?
Yeah, I mean, like, as I said, this waggish.org article by David Auerbach is extremely persuasive and convincing and kind of admirable in the detail into which it delves. I mean, like, although how do you feel about puzzle box narratives in general? If they're intentionally encoded in order to be kind of decoded by the viewer, then I can kind of watch them and appreciate them. I don't really have any real desire to go back to them once I've seen them.
Right.
The thing with Lynch is I can't wait to rewatch Twin Peaks in the third season at least, and to get to grips with it as a whole, on a tonal level, on on its thematic level. In terms of its plot, I'm still not really sure the extent to which all of this is meant to gel.
Right. I mean, I like in terms of puzzle box narratives. When I say that term, I think of Primer.
Okay.
And I think that when, like, Primer demands that you expend an enormous amount of mental energy on just understanding what literally took place.
Yeah.
And I mean, the plot and the time travel and the doppelganger thing has thematic resonance as well. Maybe it's not the best example in those terms. Maybe like a Christopher Nolan film. Maybe something like Dunkirk is a better example.
See, I was thinking of something like The Usual Suspects.
Right, or The Usual Suspects. Yeah. But with Lynch, particularly in the final episode, where you're out of time and there's this mystery of who is Carrie. What is her name?
Carrie Page.
Carrie Page. Yeah. I mean, that is it's narratively it's confounding, but it's also it has real emotional content.
Yeah, I would agree.
But
the emotional content has to be anchored in some way to plot. It's not, these characters, they're not just like abstracts floating through the frame. There is enough attachment there for the Sarah Palmer household to mean something, to have emotional content, as you said. It has to, right?
Yeah.
So,
But it doesn't have to. It doesn't. Remember the Mulholland Drive DVD came with 10 postcards.
Yeah, I have it.
Were billed as 10 clues to unlocking this thriller. And I think that a huge part of the crossover appeal of Mulholland Drive was that it was marketed in that way. That this was a puzzle that you could solve, and you could find out what was really happening behind all of the strangeness on the surface. But that was never what drew me to Lynch's work. And his films, and this is the thing. One of the reasons that the original Twin Peaks is not my favorite thing that he's ever done is because I do think that it's the least surreal. Well, with the exception of things that he didn't originate, like Elephant Man and Dune and Straight Story. But in terms of his original material, I do think that it's the least surrealist in the proper sense. And a huge part of that is due to the fact that it was passed off to other writers and showrunners, who took the surreal elements that he had introduced, which he admits that he never planned to, wrap up or explain, like he was never going to reveal who killed Laura. But except that it would be this entity, but he would never ground it in any physical kind of agent. But the writers who came in afterwards took these surreal elements and they kind of they imposed an order on them,
which is kind of incompatible with surrealism in general.
Right. Yeah.
What do you think about something with regard to Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me then?
Well, see, actually that's something that I wanted to talk about as well, because the final scene in the new series was so powerful, and it was so rooted in the long relationship that you have with the Laura Palmer story, and with her as a victim, and her as a survivor, and her as her self-destruction also. And it was, like, as I said, it was so powerful that I immediately started to think about Fire Walk with Me and how, I don't like it that much. And I was thinking, well, maybe it is better than I thought it was. Because the people who love Fire Walk with Me, they love it because of its portrayal of Laura's suffering and her abuse and her reaction to that and her spiral of self-destruction and all of that. And that is, without question, the best material in the film. But then I was thinking, well, yeah, but there's also the first 40 minutes, which has nothing. I know that there's a connection with Leland and Teresa Banks. But yeah, I mean, and then the problem for me with Fire Walk with Me is that it was never really one thing or the other. If Lynch wanted to make a film about a woman or a girl suffering this kind of abuse and like living through this kind of hell, he could have done that without the connection to Twin Peaks. But he decided to do this prequel, so we already know all of the story. We already know, And there's a reason that was the backstory to begin with. You're saying, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the original series has this traditional murder mystery structure where the body is discovered at the beginning, and you have an outside investigator come in who doesn't know the town or the people, and we learn with him about all these people, and we gradually learn like the dark secrets of the town, and then he gradually pieces together a picture of what happened and how that person ended up dead. So we know beat for beat everything that led up to Laura's death. So in the film, what you end up with is scenes where it's like, remember in the series, Donna goes to visit what is his name, the shut-in, Harold, who has Laura's secret diary. It's like, remember Donna visited Harold to get Laura's secret diary? Well, here's a scene of Laura visiting Harold and giving him the diary. And you get this kind of this like typical prequel kind of moments. But at the same time, it kind of breaks with the some of the core ideas of the show, which is the possession of Leland Palmer. It kind of makes that much more ambiguous as to whether Leland is conscious of what he's doing, and so it doesn't really fit with the show, but at the same time it doesn't stand independently of it either.
I think that's one of the strong points of season 3, that it's this potentially redundant premise of extending or continuing what had become, I think, quite a tedious show.
Absolutely, yeah.
And to mention the Matt Zoller Sites article again, he says, again, to season 3's merit, he says that maybe our idea or memory of the original series was a false memory. You know, I think a lot of people who went into this have either forgotten how kind of forgettable season 2 was or is. And so I worried going into season 3 that it was going to be this redundant extension. But I think the important thing is that it's not only an extension of the show, it's an expansion of it. And again, it's about the mechanisms by which we, you know, get to grip, you know, come to terms with its own legacy. So, like, it's not just a show in itself, it's a show about the show. And like dragging Twin Peaks as a fictional universe into a world that has a world outside of it that's changed in the last 25 years. The landscape's dramatically different, and so I found that a kind of fascinating tension throughout season 3. Even though my appreciation of it kind of fluctuated, not appreciation of it, even though my kind of attention fluctuated from week to week, I thought it was an intensely compelling kind of experience to watch. And I think a large part of that is to do with its unwavering pace, which is a double-edged sword. But to come back to my original question before we ran into technical difficulties there, would you throw Lucy and Andy in with the likes of Nadine and Jacoby? You know, those scenes, I mentioned those two because for me they're kind of superfluous characters. They were kind of, you know, they had this quirky appeal in the original seasons. I'm not really sure what they add to this, other than the fact that it's this, you know, idea of harmless or good-natured fan service interspersed with whatever else is going on.
Michael Cera?
I mean, come on. I mean, okay, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time for another kind of award, if we're calling them this. So we've
to answer your question, I wouldn't put them in the same category. I think that because I don't think that they're as isolated from the main goings on as those other characters. And also you do have Andy's trip into the White Lodge as well, which is a very good scene.
Yeah.
And also you have Lucy being the one who kills, or not kills, but saves Frank Truman from Mr. C.
Yeah. So we've had best performance, Kyle MacLachlan, which I think we've agreed upon. What about like most unwelcome return?
Most unwelcome return. Oh, that's easy. Not so much the character, but let me just check what I wrote down. What episode that was in? Right. So episode 13 was the episode where in the Roadhouse at the end we were treated to a rendition of "Just You" by James.
Yeah.
That was the low point of the show, I have to say. I like when I saw him appear on stage.
Do you think it's a joke on Lynch's pod?
Yeah, probably.
And the actors, perhaps. Do you know?
No, maybe so.
They have to be aware of the fact that the low point in the original 2 seasons is maybe the also acoustic rendition that we're treated to from James.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also the one of the low points is his storyline with the what was her name, Madeline or something? Evelyn, I think. You
watched it more recently than I did, and you've still forgotten the name of it. So you know that's how forgettable it is. No, but most unwelcome return though? Would you say like James in general, or just that scene in the Roadhouse?
Just that scene in the Roadhouse. I don't think he doesn't really, you know. I mean, what else does he do in the show, really? He's friends with the guy with the green glove, and that's really about it.
Yeah, I mean, like, he is in the first episode at the very end. And
they suggest that there's a relationship between him and the woman who he's looking at, but
yes.
When I watched the first episode, for a second I thought that they had recast Donna as that woman, but I don't think so.
It's actually at the end of the second part, sorry, because the first 2 parts aired together. But that's a great scene in the Roadhouse. It's the first instance of the Roadhouse of many. and it closes with the Chromatics and Shadow, which is a song that I hadn't heard before. And
yeah, it's good.
And it comes out of nowhere, and James's appearance is kind of out of nowhere, because up to that point in the first 2 hours, we're introduced to a lot of new characters, a lot of new material. Obviously, like Lynch just kind of pulling the rug immediately from the people who were expecting a lot of fan service, and then at the end of that, we have this kind of out of the blue scene in which James is there with the Cockney guy who turns out to be this green gloved superhero, but like it's a really, really moving scene. I had to watch it twice when I first caught that double episode, and it's almost like it's reminding us that Twin Peaks exists, and as a town, I mean, and that this place continues to kind of live on, although the rest of the world is also happening. And it's like, oh, by the way, we're back in Twin Peaks territory here, and I think a large part of that is actually the appearance of James himself, who he's lost his hair, and like he's a lot thinner and a lot older, and it's like, oh wow, this is 25 years later. And
yeah, they say something about him being weird, and Shelley says no, he was just in a motorcycle accident, and he's just quiet now.
Yeah,
but James is still cool. He's always been cool.
Yeah, like Shelley. So Shelley's there in that scene as well. I forgot about that. And then like Balthazar Getty's like making gun gestures towards Shelley, and it's like it took somebody else to actually tell me that was Balthazar Getty. I totally didn't know that at the time.
What does his character end up doing?
Oh, I have there's so many, that's the point. Like I've forgotten so many things. Like because he comes in. Does he come into the diner when Ed's talking to Shelley and Bobby?
Ed is talking to Shelley.
Bobby, sorry, not Ed. Is it Bobby?
Yeah,
Talking
it
to
is.
Shelley. And he comes in and Shelley goes out to kiss him, and Bobby's upset and stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's actually one of my favourite scenes in the show. That's when the bullet comes through the window.
Yeah.
And Bobby goes out to see what's going on, and it was a kid from the back of like an SUV.
Yeah.
And then they have what I think is probably the funniest scene in the show. The woman who's trying to get home.
Yeah, and Bobby has to negotiate. I mean, I'll just quickly answer my own question. Most unwelcome return for me would have to be kind of Nadine, I think, and the way her encounter with Jacoby seems to prompt her visit to Ed to give him like the go ahead to live his life, and then we have that kind of really weird fan service, arbitrary inclusion of Ed and Norma sort of getting engaged, and it just felt like, okay, it's 25 years later. At that point, I think we've spent 14 to 16 hours in this universe again, without really any investment in Ed's attachment to Norma. And
that was episode 15.
15. And then all of a sudden it's like... It's at the very beginning of episode 15, no?
I can't remember, I just wrote it down. Episode 15.
So yeah, so 14 episodes in, and then we're meant to kind of like feel a certain... pleasure in seeing that happen. It just felt like, okay, on the one hand it's harmless, and if we have to have all of the great stuff in season 3 because of that, fair enough. But I'm still not convinced that it needs to be there. So that would be.
Would you say that you have a sentimental attachment to these characters at all?
No.
From the original series, no, neither do I. But obviously, a lot of people do.
Mm.
So a lot of that stuff is there for them, but it means nothing to me.
But so coming back to the diner and that good scene that you mentioned with Bobby, another question I was going to ask: most welcome returning character, or the one that sort of surprised you the most?
Most welcome.
Or actor. Just
It would have to be Grace Zabriskie.
It would?
Yeah.
I mean, I had written her down also for this, but also Dana Ashbrook, who plays Bobby. Because I thought
he was good.
He's it's not that memorable a performance in the first 2 seasons, and his character's kind of like, we're meant to kind of find him extremely annoying, I think. And if memory serves, he doesn't really undergo any sort of maturity process, a process of maturity in the first 2 seasons.
No, he does. He does. Remember he starts working for Ben Horne, and then he kind of like reconciles with his father as well.
Really? Wow, I can't remember that.
Major Briggs tells him about a dream that he had where Bobby's future, where he was happy and Bobby's very moved by it, and yeah, he does. He definitely matures across the second
but
season.
He's not a cop by the end of the first season.
No.
So
and that's actually something that I wanted to say as well, is that because when I saw that he was a cop, I was thinking, well, what happened to because he killed somebody.
He did.
Yeah. And he killed one of the I think it was one of the Renault brothers in the forest.
Yeah.
And they mention it because they use the footage again.
It's true.
In episode 17.
Bobby killed a guy.
Yeah, Laura tells James that he killed someone.
And James with,
but it never comes up again.
James with typical deadpan charm just says nothing of it. He's just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think he believes her.
Okay, what was your favorite episode?
Well, I would have to say the last one.
Yeah?
Yeah, even though the first 20 minutes were grating on my nerves a little bit, but I also love the way that they used the material again, that they used from Fire Walk With Me and the pilot in episode 17. I thought that was amazing. That he was going into what is it? He goes into the. How does it work again? Does he access the past through the White Lodge? You know the way they have that weird device that shrinks you down and puts you into the cinema screen.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember if that's how he gets there or not, but he goes into the past, and then they use. And this is like, I mean, this was obviously not, intended in Fire Walk With Me, but when Laura is talking to James on the motorcycle, she looks into the forest and she screams.
Yeah.
They used that. It's like she actually sees Cooper in the forest.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really, really clever. There's actually a lot of it's not probably quite right to call it foreshadowing, because it couldn't really have been intended, but stuff like the episode in the first or maybe early second season where Cooper and Harry rescue Audrey from One-Eyed Jacks, and then they are rescued by Hawk. And then Cooper says to Hawk, if I'm ever lost, I hope you're the man they send to find me.
Yeah.
And then Hawk is the one who's trying to find Cooper in this
true.
one. And, things like the man from another place saying, when you see me again, I won't be me. And, the actor was asked to come back.
Yeah.
He just declined to come back, and it's just this sort of serendipitous circumstances where he's a weird little lump of flesh on a tree. But that kind of stuff is really, really good.
So, to come back to
I'd have to say episode 18 is my favorite.
I mean, episode 8 is the one where, we've got those kind of surreal moments early on where Cooper, ultimately turns into Dougie Jones. That's good stuff. Episode 8, though, the origin story for Frank and linked to the atomic bomb and that bug going into the sleeping teenager's mouth.
Yeah, I saw people speculating that was Sarah Palmer.
It makes sense, right? Because it's 1956.
Is it? No, it's 45, isn't it?
It's 45? I thought it was 56 at that point. Because it goes ahead.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, maybe. Would you say that's your favourite episode?
It's the one that sort of stands out for me, because it's just something. It's just completely as a standalone segment that at that point doesn't really further any plot in terms of significance. Although obviously it comes to light later on what it all means.
Okay, I have a list in my that I made last night when I was watching the show again on times 30 speed.
Have you ranked them?
No, I'm just going to go through them. Okay, so in episode in the two-parter at the beginning, the death of the couple in the loft in New York. Yeah. These are just scenes that I liked. Okay. Okay. Episode 3, when Mr. C is trying to resist being taken back to the Black Lodge, and whatever physical strain it puts on his body, he disgorges this toxic waste in the car. And that's his and the red curtains are hanging down in front of the car, and he's on the verge of being taken back, but he's stronger than Dougie Jones is. So Dougie Jones is the one that gets taken back because he's vomiting at the same time.
That's right. In
the motel room, and that's when Cooper comes through the plug socket.
I can only imagine what that scene looks like at 30 times speed.
Yeah, and then obviously the same episode, Cooper's exodus from the lodge is great. Also, that's the episode where we get Dougie in the casino.
Hello.
Yeah, that was good. Okay, and then I don't have anything written down for episodes 4 and 5. Episode 6 is I said that the scene outside of the diner with the kid shooting the gun through the window and the woman trying to get home with the sick girl.
That's as early as episode 6.
No. Sorry, I said that was the first scene, but in episode 6 you have Ike the Spike murdering those women in the apartment or in the office rather, which there was something about the combination of like you had seen him in the motel, like drinking bourbon with the two photographs, and he's like, what is he doing? He's stabbing them with his ice pick, and the beat is playing.
That's right.
And then you get a couple of different scenes. I think you get a scene with Ben Horn and whatever, and then you get this shot of an office corridor, and then the beat drops.
Yeah.
And you make that association with this guy that you just saw, and he comes running around the corner. You hear him stabbing somebody, and somebody's screaming, and he runs around the corner, and brutally murders this woman in the office, and then chases somebody else out the door, and you can hear him killing her as well. But then he comes back in, and his ice pick is bent, and he looks down at it, and he's heartbroken. I was just in tears at that. And then you've got episode 8, the whole flashback sequence. You've got Matthew Lillard's death in episode 11, where he's killed in the back of the police car.
Well, I was going to ask you who was your favourite new addition to the cast, and I'm asking that now because Matthew Lillard would be mine.
Right. Okay. Yeah, he was really good. Yeah, and actually, because I remember saying to you, like, where is he? Because he disappears. He's in the first episode and then he's gone.
It seems like a really significant addition to the show, and then he just disappears for about 7 or 8 episodes.
Yeah, at least. Yeah, I would also say that Laura Dern as Diane. Yeah, I thought she was excellent.
Yeah.
She has a way of acting that it's a little bit kind of unconvincing, but it suits Lynch's material.
Well, in the same way I think that Naomi Watts
as well. Yeah, actually, she was really good as well.
Her line deliveries. I read, I forget where, but I read earlier in the season that Naomi Watts seems to have a natural line delivery that's it's tailor made for a Lynch film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I would say
she was very good.
So what other moments?
I just wanted to say that Lynch's line reading when when Matthew Lillard's head explodes in the back of the car, he's dead.
It is great. A great scene though, because we hear it explode, right? We don't see it in like.
Yeah, it splatters the cop in the front of the car.
That's right.
You don't see it explode, but you see the what would you call them, miners, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
are they supposed to be homeless people, or like whatever they're supposed to be? Yeah, you see them approaching in their kind of like spectral form.
Again, it's from Diane's point of view, is it?
No, I don't think she sees it happening.
She sees the guy out of the car, I think. Because at that point, we're beginning to suspect that she's not, on the side of the feds.
Yeah, she's been texting somebody, and they haven't asked me about it yet. Yeah. But you see Matthew Lillard, and his head is kind of vibrating.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to the guy in the front of the car, and the blood splatters his face.
And there's this wonderful thud, like a squelchy thud when it explodes, and the guy looks behind him. If I recall correctly, he says something like, "Oh fuck."
Yeah, that's the same episode with the diner shooting scene.
Okay.
Which I actually forgot to say. So they're in the diner, and they're talking about Amanda Seyfried's relationship with I forget the name of the character, the guy who played the lead in Antiviral.
Caleb Landry Jones.
Caleb Landry Jones, from the Cronenberg film. They're talking about her like dysfunctional relationship with him and how she should leave him and all that. And then you get Balthazar Getty coming, and it's just this very kind of normal sort of domestic scene, and then the bullet comes through the window.
That's right.
And like Norma calls for the lights to be turned off, and Bobby takes his gun out and runs outside, and it turns out that they had, like, the dad had left the gun under the seat or something, and the mother had kind of pushed it back. She didn't realize it was the gun, and the kid picked it up and shot it out the window. So the situation is kind of diffused like that. There's no danger.
Yeah.
But the kid is wearing like these like combat jeans and stuff, and he has one hand on his hip, and he's giving Bobby this look, like this really like hostile look. It's so good. And then the woman in the car behind starts honking the horn and screaming about how she needs to get home.
Yeah.
And then like she seems to just be in a hurry, and then she's like, and she's sick. And the girl in the passenger seat sits up and starts vomiting this green. It's fantastic. It's absolutely, like, I think it's my favorite scene with the exception of the very, very final scene of the last episode. It's my favorite scene in the show. Then you've got, in the next episode, you've got Sarah Palmer's episode in the supermarket, which was very good. It's very menacing.
It's not the same episode in which she's watching the boxing match, is it?
She's watching the boxing match. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Maybe it is. Maybe she goes home and that's when that happens. I'm not sure.
It's the same episode in which Hawk goes to visit her because of the episode
Hawk visits
in the
her.
supermarket.
Yeah. That episode 12, is also where we get the 11-minute argument scene between Audrey and her husband.
Finally, we see Audrey. Yeah.
Cheryl and Fenn's introduction. Yeah. And that scene was endless.
And it also
repetitive.
Introduces many different character names who we haven't met at that point. Although, because of the nature of the show, we're kind of trying to figure out if we've heard of them or not. Right.
And then you've got the next episode 13, you have Mr. C, his arm wrestling scene.
Yeah, that's a great scene. And it's also
excellent, yeah.
It's also an example of that later scene with Grace Zabriskie eating the guy's face or whatever, where there's a build-up and an energy to it, where we want certain things to happen, and then Lynch follows through and allows them to happen. Like, you know, it's a really great scene, and that's the point at which I was kind of really rooting for Mr. C, because the whole Ducky Jones thing was kind of becoming tedious for me. I thought, like, you know, Cooper's a Fed, therefore the real villain of the show, and Mr. C is this some kind of subversive figure in society that kind of allows things to realign themselves in a moral sense. But alas, you know, he does turn out to be the villain.
That's the same episode then that Jacoby and Nadine finally meet up outside her Silent Drape Runner store, and it concludes with the rendition of Just You. So,
I thought you were listing your good points here. This is
no, sorry, those are negatives.
Okay.
Episode 14, we have Andy's visit to the White Lodge.
Yeah.
We have the story of the Green Glove in the same episode.
Yeah.
And we also have the Sarah Palmer bar scene in the same episode.
Yeah,
that's a strong episode.
An exciting episode. Yeah, where things start to kind of come together.
Yeah. Then episode 15, all I have written here is Ed and Norma. So
yeah, good
skip over that one. Episode 16. Okay, so you have the gun battle in Dougie's Street, which is amazing.
Which I
Tim
was
Roth
crying
and Jennifer
at
Jason
with
Leigh.
laughter in the same way that you were with like the spikes running along the corridor killing. I don't actually know what Jennifer Jason Leigh and Tim Roth are doing. Who are they? Are they associated with Mr. C?
Yeah, he hires them.
Does he?
Or they work for him.
Like, who's the guy that they shoot with a sniper gun outside of his home? Is that just
outside of whose home?
Like his own home. Like they shoot some guy with a sniper rifle. Is that just like
the guy that Tim Roth shoots?
Yeah. Is that just to introduce us to them as assassins, and we're not really sure who the victim is? I can't really remember, to be honest.
I can't remember.
Okay. It is a great scene, though. Yeah,
excellent. Yeah. That's also the episode with Diane's attempted assassination of Gordon and Albert, where that's a really, really good scene, particularly as it dawns on Albert and what's the woman's name?
I forget.
But you can see, like, Gordon. I don't know if Gordon is as clued in as they are, but you can see it kind of dawning on them that something bad is about to happen, and you can see him kind of like undoing his jacket and like you know, reaching for his gun, and then she gets taken to the lodge. Before she does it, she's saying, "I'm not me."
Not me. She's I think she's come to the realization that she's a doppelganger for Diane.
Right, yeah.
And
because that's what they say to her when she goes to the lodge.
Yeah, Mike says
you were manufactured. Yeah, which is what he also says to Dougie. So Dougie was manufactured presumably by Mr. C in the event that, for the eventuality that the lodge would attempt to take him back, that Dougie would go instead of him. I guess. And then you've got Audrey's dance. Which is really fantastic. And also, what did you make of that when the dance ends and she just comes, she wakes up in like a white room looking into the mirror? Where's Audrey?
So she's like, because the only other scenes that we see her in, she's trapped in this conversation with presumably her husband
about a guy named Billy.
Yes, and that's the scene, I think, from which we realise that these different subplots are happening at different times and at different time scales, a bit like Nolan's Dunkirk, because that scene, I think, encompasses about 3 different episodes, and around it other things are happening at different times, and that's just kind of continuously on loop almost. And then they finally do get to the roadhouse, and I thought, oh, we're going to have some kind of Dunkirk style intersecting of these storylines, and then of course it's not to be, because she seems to be in some kind of alternate reality anyway. I mean, I don't know.
I'll come back to that in a second, actually.
Okay.
But the episode 17, then after the fight scene with Bob, Cooper looks at the woman with no eyes, and from the second that he sees her, the initial expression on his face is overlaid on everything that happens in the remainder of that scene. Yeah. Right. So you've got a close up of his face. Yeah. It's like in slow motion, and it's overlaid, which I thought was great. And then you've got the whole the reuse of the footage from Fire Walk with Me, and him trying to lead. And like you were saying, that this is kind of a meta commentary on Twin Peaks, and I think that's the moment where it becomes very much that he goes back to the film, and he's in the film, and he's trying to take her, and they're putting him into the cinema screen. Yeah. Or they put Mr. C into the cinema screen anyway, through that weird horn thing where they shrink him down. And then we're into episode 18, which we've already talked about. I did want to say that one of the cliffhangers at the end of season 2 was Audrey, her civil disobedience in the Twin Peaks savings and loan when the bomb goes off. So I was going to ask, do you think she survived the explosion? No. I would say no as well. She was pretty close to it.
It reminds me of when I went to see Syriana with a friend, and George. This is a spoiler for Syriana. When George Clooney's walking away, going to walk away from another car bomb, and the bomb goes off, and in the packed cinema, my friend turned to me and he went, "Do you think he's dead?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I think he's dead."
But the other things that I was thinking of that were because season 2 ends on a battery of cliffhangers. They realized that they were going to get cancelled. The ratings had plummeted after the reveal of the resolution of the Laura Palmer case. Yeah. And there was really very little possibility of a third season, but they were trying to kind of juice the ratings and get people sort of interested again. So they did at the end of season 1, which is the same as 7 or 8 cliffhangers in the final episode of season 1, just to kind of guarantee audience anticipation for the second season. Yeah. Obviously it didn't work, but season 2 ends. It's not only how's Annie and Cooper's fate in the Black Lodge and everything. It's also it's not in the final episode, but Josie's death and her imprisonment in the Great Northern, in the wood of the Great Northern. Do you remember that?
No.
She dies. She's not killed. She just dies, from some sort of supernatural.
Yeah, Josie's possessed by Bob. No.
Is she possessed by Bob?
Yeah. Oh. When she turns on Harry.
That's because she's possessed by Bob?
I think so. Isn't it?
I thought it was because she was being manipulated by Thomas Eckert, and I can't remember. Anyway, she dies in the Great Northern. She's not killed. She just, for some supernatural reasons, she dies, and her spirit passes into the wood in the walls of the Great Northern.
I see
and
what
there's
you
this
mean. Yeah.
very early CGI
into the
thing
doorknob.
where her the door into it's I don't think it's the doorknob. It's the handle of the chest of drawers or the bedside locker, and she's screaming in the wood, which seems like the kind of thing that they would have picked up again for this season.
What about
like it doesn't seem like the kind of thing they would have dropped, because it's very much of a piece tonally with what happened in this season, and it was one of the cooler things that happened in the second season, I think. Also, I had forgotten this. One of the late storylines and one of the cliffhangers in season 2 is Donna's discovery that Ben Horne is her biological father, which also results in Ben, after he comes out of his really annoying period where he's recreating the Civil War, he's trying to like better himself. He's trying to become like a humanitarian, and he's trying to like mend fences in his life and stuff. But in doing that, he kind of inadvertently disrupts the Hayward family by kind of courting I forget the name of Donna's mother, but so he, because the way she's going to meet with him and everything, and Donna and Audrey are trying to figure out why they're having these secret meetings, but it ends up with Doc Hayward attacking Ben in the Hayward house. He hits him over the head with like a poker or a lamp or something, and he like falls into the fireplace. Like, what happened there? I don't know. Because Doc Hayward and Ben Horne are both in this series. Obviously, he survived that, but then you've also got Bobby. We already mentioned this. Bobby having killed one of the Renault brothers.
Yeah.
Which they obviously didn't ignore because they used the footage from Fire Walk with Me.
Yeah.
But he became a cop eventually. So is that like a secret that he still keeps, or what happened there?
Presumably.
And then you've also got what everybody really wanted to know: how did Leo escape from the spider trap that Wyndham Earl left him in?
I can't.
That was a pretty impressive trap.
I can't really remember, to be honest. What happens with Leo Johnson?
So remember, Leo gets shot by Hank. He gets shot by Hank, and Bobby witnesses it.
Right.
It's in the Johnson house. Hank shoots him through the window, and then he's that's how he becomes catatonic or whatever.
But that turns out he's only
he comes out of that. Yeah. He comes out of that, and he attacks. He tries to kill Shelley.
Yeah.
And then he flees into the woods, and he stumbles onto Wyndham Earl's cabin. And then Wyndham Earl puts like a shock collar on him and turns him into his like servant.
Right.
And then when he's eventually, he has no more use for him, he puts him in. Oh, sorry. Leo also tries to kind of like escape, and he kind of betrays Wyndham Earl and stuff. So Earl punishes him by putting him in a trap that he creates, which is, so he has Leo with his hands tied behind his back and a rope between his teeth, and the rope is suspended over the rafter, and above him is like a glass box filled with different types of spiders, and so Leo has to, like, when Leo can hold onto the rope no longer, the glass is going to fall on his head. It doesn't seem like that dangerous of a trap. But what happened to Leo Johnson?
He's still there.
Is he still there?
He's still there, yeah. Don't you remember that scene in episode 9 of the 3rd season where we're briefly treated to... No, I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Who was your least favourite new addition?
I mean, I was glad Michael Cera only had one scene. That was pretty brutal.
It was. I mean, we've mentioned him in brief there. Caleb Landry Jones was my least favourite character.
Oh, do you know who else I was waiting for was some sort of appearance, not necessarily an appearance by Donna, but some sort of reference to her, because the other Haywards, I don't think her mum is in it, but Doc Hayward is in at least one scene.
Yeah.
And also, what is her sister's name? Played by Alicia Witt. She's seeing Caleb Landry Jones. Remember, they have that scene in the forest.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they have that scene in the forest. But what? Yeah, I don't know. What happens?
It's a scene in which he ends up killing himself. No, Caleb Landry Jones. Yeah.
Does he kill himself?
Oh, he is killed.
He's killed, alright. Yeah. I can't remember exactly.
But like the reason why I think he's my least favourite addition is that when he does kick the bucket, at that point I'm thinking to myself, well, hold on, who's that guy again? I know he had some kind of interaction with Shelley's daughter, but I'd forgotten the complete significance of his character.
He's her husband, isn't he?
He is?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow. I mean...
Yeah, he is, yeah.
I mean, that kind of stuff, if and when I get around to rewatching this season, for me, it kind of doesn't really add anything. You've got Harry Dean Stanton as well. He was a, pretty good addition.
Harry Dean Stanton was good, yeah. Sorry, I'm just checking what her name was. Kirsten Hayward. Alicia Witt, Kirsten
Hayward.
Kirsten, with a G.
Kirsten.
Yeah. And while we're on the subject of Alicia Witt and David Lynch material, she's in one of the best things he ever did was Blackout, the short film that he made for the hotel room.
I haven't seen this.
HBO series with Crispin Glover. Yeah, that's really good.
And Alicia Witt's in that?
It's only Alicia Witt and Crispin Glover. They're newlyweds, staying in the hotel room, and she's having some kind of dissociative psychological episode where there's a blackout, and when the blackout happens, it's like something trips in her brain. It's really, really good. Yeah, that was an aborted anthology series produced for HBO. Straight after Twin Peaks. What's
your favourite performance in the Roadhouse? Because that becomes...
I actually made some notes here about that as well.
Because it's almost a structuring device. We don't get one in the first hour, and we don't get one in the final hour. But I think at the end of each episode between those...
no, there are two or three where we don't.
There are. Yeah. End of each of those episodes, or most of them, we're treated to a cameo performance by an either real-life band or a fictional band or performer.
Are there fictional ones?
And I suppose James is.
I guess, yeah. I think they're mostly real. I liked you mentioned Shadow by the Chromatics, so that was good. I also liked Tarifa by Sharon Van Etten, which was at the end of the episode 6.
Okay.
Also, I quite liked the Rebecca Del Rio song.
Yeah.
No Stars, that was good.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of other okay ones.
I mean, I think the most...
Out of Sand by Eddie Vedder was okay.
The most sort of Lynchian ones that give the scene its real sort of Lynchian energy, where we feel like, even by its very tone, it's going to be some kind of cliffhanger. Trouble by Snake Eyes by Trouble, which is a band that includes, I think, David Lynch's son.
Okay.
And it's very sort of... it's like a... I don't know, rhythmic rock and roll sort of beat to it. No lyrics, all music. And that's... I forget which episode it concludes, but I remember feeling like, wow, this could go on forever. A bit like that scene in, is it the Pink Room in Fire Walk With Me? With the endless strobe lighting and music.
Right.
And then we have Axolotl by The Veils, featuring
right,
LP.
the one that was produced and co-written by LP.
Yeah. And that's, again, another kind of cliffhanger, because we've got that otherwise inexplicable moment of the girl in the roadhouse
being taken out of the booth by the two biker guys,
and then
crawling on the floor.
Yeah, and then just because it begins to strobe, and then her scream ends the episode. And that's the point at which I felt like this is really getting into the final hours of this now, and it's beginning to get very exciting indeed.
Okay. One final question. Do you think that Twin Peaks The Return is better than the original series?
I think it is. I thought it was quite early on, actually, to be honest. Again, bearing in mind I haven't seen the first 2 seasons for a long time. I felt it was perhaps the only one of the 3 that had been devised and completed as a fully structured thing.
As an 18-hour film?
Yeah, indeed. And I think it deepens and explores the first two seasons, as I said, in this kind of reflexive way. That's exciting to watch, a visceral experience in itself, but it's also about other things as well. It's about the nature of watching serial art, I suppose, serial film, and it's about that landscape, and it's exciting me on many different levels because of that. You?
I think I would have been a little bit more unsure before the final 2 episodes, but yeah, I would say yes. I still wish that it had been, 6 to 8 hours shorter.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, the connections to and the meta commentary on the original series isn't that valuable to me. So if I had a choice, I would much prefer that Showtime had financed 8 David Lynch feature films, to allow him to, because I mean, he's obviously using this as a canvas for exploring a lot of different creative impulses that are not necessarily dictated by what would logically follow in a 3rd season of Twin Peaks. And yeah, the primary appeal of it for me was always, wow, like 18 hours of new David Lynch material. But I would have preferred that was in the form of feature films that could be, absorbed independently of each other. Yeah,
I mean, I get that. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. This scene, I think, isn't this the 1st or 2nd hour of the young couple being killed in the glass box?
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, I was extremely sort of invested, and I thought, wow, if it continues like this, I mean, and the lo-fi effects of the horror as well, which was like almost adds to it. I mean, you mentioned earlier that a lot of people were disappointed because it's not as scary or whatever, and I think a lot of that is to do with the false memory again, as Matthew Zoller-Seitz said, the false memory of the 2nd season, and actually how very few moments are scary, although there's a tonal dread there. I think the 3rd season is as scary as anything Lynch has ever done, and I think like those kinds of moments, like Matthew Lillard's head exploding, for instance, I think that's what he does best, and the build up to those kinds of things. So yeah, I mean, it's I would echo your kind of desire to see more Lynch material in the form of standalone features.
Yeah. Okay, all right, leave it there.
Okay. This has been Habitus. You've been listening to Michael Pattison and Bobby Lowe. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening. See you next time.